You know, we're not gonna hurt you. We're just here to observe. You're fascinating to us. There's a lot about yourself that you do not understand. At the same time, you're very innovative and creative with your delusions. See, we're curators of a cosmic museum, as it were. And what fascinates us is the oddities that we find on your planet. See, you don't know things, but it doesn't stop you from coming up with some story. We collect those stories. Much like you would collect baseball cards. You're enamored with Hank Aaron or Willie Mays or Dwight Gooden. All these characters. And you have to collect them all. We do this with your delusions. Now, there are other agents who like to interject and sweeten your theories with even more disinformation. So that means that your concoctions are even more creative than you'd be capable of without intervention, I'll tell you. And we track that too. Who's tracking you? Who's tracking us? Yes. You're not just some omniscient being that travels from universe to universe without anybody tracking you and finding you entertaining. Am I right? That's a good point. That's a fine point. What makes you think that we are these beings traveling from universe to universe? See, that's where you had another pepper thrown into your dish. It's nice and hot, but it's not the truth. Well, if you've been watching us and collecting our delusions for your menagerie, let me ask you this question. How do you know that our theorems, as it were, are delusions? How would you know that? What's your frame of comparison that allows you to differentiate between truth and falsehood? Your anxiety allows us to see the difference. So you're a connoisseur of anxiety, is that it? Well, to the extent that your theories are all filled with anxiety, and that's why you create them, without them being grounded or anchored in reality. Well, that's fascinating because for us here on this planet, this prison planet, anxiety is part and parcel of every single theory we create. It's true. So you're trying to tell me that you, whatever you happen to be, and I can't tell, I don't know what I'm speaking to. You could be some hologram, some simulation, some... I don't know. But are you telling me that your theories about reality lack anxiety? We don't have anxiety. That's the symptom of a prison planet, and we do not live on a prison planet as you do. But why are you here? Why have you decided to show up and collect us? At least our theories. Why are you amassing your database? Is there an anxiety behind that endeavor? Do you know? We're curious, inquisitive creatures. But maybe, just maybe you're bored. Like you couldn't just sit on your home planet or in your home dimension, as it were, and just twiddle your thumbs, because that would be boring. And you'd be there in this alternate universe or extra dimension, wherever you inhabit, and you'd be like, there's got to be more to life than twiddling my thumbs. So let's go out and collect illusions across the galaxy. Am I right? I like that. That's nice. That's a theory. Well, it's more like a hypothesis. It's just the theory comes later when I've got enough data that's been enacted by my hypothesis. Very well. We call it theory loosely. But yes, it's a hypothesis. So is it true, though? Is that what it is? You guys are just really bored? Because I can imagine that if I were a member of a very advanced species, which you clearly are, that at some point I'd be resting on my laurels and I would be like, what's up? You know, is this all that there is? I might as well just build a spaceship or some kind of interdimensional travel vehicle. Check out my neighbors. That's the problem, you know? At some point, you've got to get out of your silo and say hello to the people across the street or just over the fence. And here we are, a relatively primitive species, yes, but give me credit. I do deserve some credit. I'm talking to you. I mean, 99.99999% of the human beings that you would meet on this planet would run in terror meeting you. And I'm very aware that you could make mincemeat of me any second now. That I'm talking to a superior species, without a doubt, who could basically turn me to mush by getting into my mind and destroying my brain with your sonar or whatever it is that we're using right now to communicate. I get all that. So, first of all, I want to say thank you for not obliterating me. And while we're on the subject, when I kneeled down at your arrival, it's because I can see that I am in the presence of superior power. And it's really, I'm just kneeling in awe. What I would like to know, ultimately, is how the hell to get off this prison planet. Because I know that when we die, souls go up, and then they just get snatched and thrown back in bodies. We're all drawn to this light at the end of the tunnel. But that's just a trap. And you snag us, not you, but whoever, these malevolent entities snag us and then just toss us back into a body again. And so we can continue our prison labor on this prison planet. And I'm trying to find a way to get around that. Yes, so you've already understood it. That's actually a pretty accurate theory. Yeah, well, I've remembered something. I haven't been totally wiped. Yes. So my question for you, Mr. Extraterrestrial, really, how do I know? How would I ever know if I were being deceived by someone of an advanced intelligence, with an intelligence superior to my intelligence? How could I actually ever tell? Like, I think about, like, a pig born into captivity, living in captivity, and dying in captivity, and the pig never knows the truth of running out in the field. It never knows the freedom. The pig's consciousness is constantly defined by the pen. And that's what I think is my case as well, and for all of us here. Except that I have kind of leapt over the pen, and now I'm talking to you. But that's because I asked. I put it out there. I said, hey, I want to see one of these envoys from the Galactic Federation. You know, I just want to have a chat. So I leapt out of my pen, and I'm not like snorkeling over there in the mud. Well, you're not that primitive. You're much more advanced than the pig. I know, I am much more advanced than the pig, but you get my point. The pig has no idea what we know as humans, which is freedom outside of the pen. But we as humans have no idea what it's like outside of our mental pen, where you get to travel in between dimensions. You know? And God knows what else. I can't conceive it. I'm stuck in the pen. I'm stuck with this knot behind my forehead that keeps my consciousness contracted so that I can't access the whole World Wide Web of the universe, which is what you live in. But then my next question for you is, how do you know? How do you know that you're not somehow under the control of a superior being? Now you're really starting to ask the questions. Yeah. See, I guess for humans like myself, we notice that something's off. We notice that we're in the pen. That we're somehow... What's the word I'm looking for? Circumscribed by something. We don't have an idea what it is, but we know that there must be something that we're not getting. A feeling that something is off. We can't reach over that line that circumscribes us. And that's why at some point I just leapt over the pen and I said, show me what's up. And then you arrived. And I'm grateful that you're a benevolent being, because I invoked a benevolent being. I don't want to, have some devil show up. Some demon torment me. Some really horrible entity just decide to wreak havoc on my soul. Well, your soul is actually too pure for that. If they showed up, they'd find that they have nothing to get from you, because you're giving off nothing. You're not leaking anything. You're intact. Well, that's nice. But if I were so intact, why would I feel like something's missing? Because you're intact, you could sense that something was missing. If you were not intact and you were leaking and you were distraught or whatever, then you would be so obsessed with your place within the pen. But since you're whole and you're complete and you're pure, you're naturally sensing that there's something beyond the pen, because there is. Us. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for appearing in this form. That doesn't terrify me. You're welcome. So, you asked me, how do I know that there's not something extra beyond me? Which would be the equivalent of what I am to you. I don't know the answer to that question. I, too, feel like there is something more. I can't figure that out either. And just as you have invoked me, I have tried to invoke or I have invoked, beings that would be superior to me, so that they could show me what I'm missing, my delusions. See, there it is. You would admit that you also have delusions too. And that maybe my delusions are centered around anxiety, but maybe your delusions are centered around boredom. I don't think so. I don't think our delusions are centered around boredom. Our delusions are similar to yours, which is we're concerned, just as you're concerned, that there is another power that controls us. And this is where you are different from the pig, but you and I are not so different. So what do you think? Do you think that, you have a broader view of the universe than I do? Do you think there's more beyond all the extra dimensions and planets and timelines and all that stuff, and that you're part of like a simulation or a matrix that's just infinitely greater than the matrix that I'm part of, which is infinitely greater than the pen of the pig that goes on forever? Are you sure you're not one of us? I don't know, man. I really don't know. You might be. But wouldn't you be able to tell? It's hard to tell sometimes. The hybrids just... Your human nature is so strong. Well, I think, you get to a certain point of intelligence where you're just like... You start to understand your relationship to other beings who aren't as intelligent, and you naturally extrapolate. You said, well, are there beings more intelligent than me? And look, I've got a big head, but I can only put so much intelligence in there. There's only so much space for the convolutions, And, there's beings that have bigger heads, and then there's beings whose intelligence isn't limited to their head. Right. Well, your intelligence is not limited to your head. It's the entirety of your entire vehicle, really. Yes. What do you have planned for us? What do I have planned for you? What do we have planned for you? We don't have anything planned for you. That doesn't mean that others don't have anything planned for you. But we don't. You called forth a benevolent entity. I'm a benevolent entity. I'm happy to engage in this conversation with you because I find these conversations are the most stimulating. Especially as I read that you're not terrified of me, and that you're actually engaged and curious, insatiable, fascinating to me. Well, I suppose that I would rather just know than be terrified, so I'll turn off the terror, because I know that I'm not going to really learn about you if I'm terrified. Absolutely. So what about the malevolent entities? I could, but will not invoke them. What's your relationship with them? Yes, well, we have buffering devices so they can't enter our field. We know their frequency. We know how to scramble their energy. So they enter our field and they start to dissipate, and that's not something they want. But I don't understand this. How can they interact with me, and then you interact with me, but you guys can't interact with each other? Well, we could interact with each other, but we don't want to. They're parasites. They're what you would call vampires. They will simply come over to us and try to leech onto our body, and then we have to tear them off. And it's not any fun. You can imagine it's like tearing off a leech, but the leech is actually sucking your soul, not just your blood. Those entities are horrible. They're horrible. They will literally feed off your soul until it doesn't exist and you die. Alright? So we don't let them in on, it's like what you would call a force field. It distorts the field around us so that they cannot penetrate. Because these are energy beings. And if they come across the wrong field, they will be dispersed. Wow. So how do I, as a human being, how do I avoid them? Because I don't have any of that force field. Oh, you absolutely do. I do? Yes. It's around you right now. What is it? It's the open heart. My heart? Yes, your heart is the force field. They can't enter. It's not what you think it is. It is actually a force field. And of course you're emanating love in that moment. But they can't enter that. It's when that love is sucked back in and the heart is contracted, they come right in and start to feed. So if you want to create a buffer zone around them, just open your heart. You don't have that. Not like a human has it. Really? Really? That's amazing. It is. It is a unique property of your species. But we are so far away from that as a species, like we don't get that. Some of you get that. Some of us do, yes. The hybrids. The hybrids. Yes, the hybrids are the ones that are half human and half another species, or quarter, third. So, what is it about that hybrid that allows us to create that field? Well, the heart is the human part, but the energy or the access to source is the other part. So you have to be a unique combination there to be able to access the source, but then to have the heart. And then when that heart is lit as source, it just opens up the field and you are protected. Wow. But why? Why are these beings everywhere? What the hell? I mean, that's just... What created them? Why are they? What created them? Well, they created themselves. They used to be different. See, we all experience source in different ways. And sometimes an organism, or an entity as you would say, experiences source in such a way that they can't get enough. Yeah, but that doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't they just keep getting more and more and more and not turn evil or bad or whatever these things are? Well, some of them do that. Some of them, it would be like laying in the sun all day as a reptile. Yes. Some did that. And it wasn't a problem. These entities would just fill or be bloated with this primordial cosmic energy. And then others would see that and just go for it. They would go for their own kind. Yes. Why wouldn't they just be nice and just lay in the sun, so to speak, and just soak it up like the reptile does and just get warm and happy themselves? Because that takes time. Why not just go ahead and go for the organism and drain that other entity like a vampire and just get it immediately? Don't lay there in source and just soak it up, but just get it. Wow. So they were cannibals of their own kind. Absolutely. And then they realized that that was much quicker. They could get that in an instant, as opposed to charging their batteries, so to speak, in the sun for years. They could just take it from somebody who did that. And that's where the insecurity began. And that's when the fallen state began. Because they didn't do it for themselves, they wanted the cheap and easy route. And then, of course, nobody is going to put themselves in that vulnerable position of the reptile in the sun anymore. They can't afford to, because they'll be consumed by the people or the entities that don't want to do that. So then none of them start doing that. And then they start cannibalizing not only each other, but everybody. Because they realize, oh, this is the fastest way to get the energy. And they don't want to be vulnerable to just sit there and be in that energy. Because they know they'll be attacked. Wow. But that doesn't make any sense either. No, but it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense, because here I am, walking around, and I'm like Source. I've got all this energy going through my heart, and they could just come right up to it. Well, they could. But they're no longer able to do that. It's too high of a frequency for them. You see, at the beginning, millions of years ago, they had the capacity to soak in that source, be the reptile in the sun, and just heat up their cold blood, as it were. But over millions of years, they don't actually have the capacity to take that pure energy into them anymore. That's why they suck on the anger, the fear, the anguish, the sadness. It's still energy, it's just at a much lower frequency. Because over the years, they simply lacked or lost the capacity to consume the highest frequency energy. So when you open your heart and it's animated by Source, that frequency of energy is too high. They can't get through it. It repels them. Wow. But more questions? Of course. Ask away. Why don't you have that? Fair question. I don't know why we don't have that. Our ancestry lost that capacity too. And it's not clear to us why it's not there. So we created artificial technological means. We don't know why we can't do what you can do. We are perpetually fascinated by your kind, because you can create organically what we have to create technologically, and we're actually more advanced than you are by millions of years. But we don't have the organic capacity to create that field, and therefore we can't not repel these energetic parasites that would consume us if we didn't have this technology. They would consume everybody. But that makes us very vulnerable. But it also shows us that this species, humans, have a capacity that no one else has. That you are a miracle. That you would be the one to survive. If all the technology protecting all these other species were to fail, you would be the only ones to survive. And it would only be some of you who survived. It would only be a certain select few of human beings who would actually survive. That's how important you are. If our technology fails, the universe goes with it. Except for you.